like, let's just try it. I've failed so many times. I've tried to start businesses that, haven't been successful. And then the things that stick and the things that work, they were meant to be because, they were. And I wouldn't have gotten to that unless I took some risks beforehand. There's a level of risk taking that we're almost like told as we're growing up not to take because our decisions matter. When I can remember that I'm just living one life and this is my only chance, then I get to be freer with those risks.
You're listening to Granite Goodness, the podcast where we interview New Hampshire people making the world a better place.
Oh, Susie, where are you going now?
My name is Andy DeMeo. Today I'm speaking to my friend Faina Bucher. Faina is the Apprenticeship Coordinator for Leadership and Management at Revision Energy. Revision is one of New England's leading solar installation providers that is also 100% employee-owned and a B Corp. We talk about mission-oriented careers, human-centered design, mentoring students, figuring out your path, academia, side hustling for good, taking risks, entrepreneurial spaghetti, and a million other things that I hope you enjoy on today's episode of Granite Goodness. Faina, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You're one of my favorite people for a million reasons. You've done a lot of really awesome things in your career. And I was wondering if you could start out with a little introduction.
Absolutely.
Maybe talk about your time at UNH.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm really honored. And let's see. So UNH, I came to UNH about 16 years ago. And I was working as a hall director for the first 4 years, which I loved, and then wanted to move off campus because as much as I loved being a hall director and being a generalist, and there was something about, not having people knock on your door for staples at 11 p.m. And so then I moved over to the Women's Studies program, which is now the Women's and Gender Studies program. And was an academic advisor, and really just enjoyed talking to students about their paths. And I, really got a sense of how much students needed to be heard, and especially when their families or their parents weren't the most supportive of their choices, you know, especially I think coming into a women's and gender studies major.
Yeah.
And then through that, I was exposed to a summer internship program, which was initiated by the Carsey School of Public Policy, and was sort of following that and really, attending the showcases and trying to get my students involved. And that's when I met UC Terrell and Fiona Wilson, who Fiona ended up later becoming my mentor, role model, supervisor, all that.
Like so many of us, right?
Exactly. And so when the Center for Social Innovation Enterprise was beginning, and UC and Fiona kind of put that together, I applied right away, and it's actually, there's a funny story there, but so I applied, got the job, and moved over. I had just finished. I had just had my kids, my twins. So I was just a few months into being a mom, and, just had no idea what I was doing on that front, but felt great about work.
A time of change.
Yeah, exactly. I had just started my MBA program because I thought, I had all this time. And I did, as I was feeding the kids, and there was just so much time that I just gave it to reading and writing. So I'd started my MBA then, and the Center for Social Innovation and Enterprise was a joint venture between the Paul School, the Paul College of Business and Economics, and the Kersey School of Public Policy. But we had ties across campus. We were working with students across campus and across locations. And then a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago at this point, we had merged with the Sustainability Institute. And so then it was a joint venture between all three. We changed our name to the Changemaker Collaborative at the Sustainability Institute. And I was the director there.
Kind of a big deal.
Well,
to me and to many other people, which you're going to continually probably undersell all the great things that you've done, but an important part of this podcast is the buttering up of guests.
You're doing great.
Yeah. One of the things that I think, yourself and Fiona and the others and UNH, right, as an institution is, done well and kind of merged these ideas of what is business and what is quote unquote sustainability. Mm-hmm. When you first entered this whole space, UNH, the academic environment, right, the MBA program, how much of that way of thinking was new, or maybe was something you were seeking? Like, tell me about the kind of your ideological
no, that's a really good question. I think, I had studied sociology and women's studies in my undergrad, and then student affairs for grad, and I had really seen the world through this lens of like systemic issues and problems and things that needed to be fixed, right? I think it took me time, or it took meeting people like Fiona and learning about social innovation and learning about doing well, while doing good,
right.
And to spark the idea that I could be a part of a solution, right? Mm-hmm. And not just pointing out where the issues and problems are. And I think that's what really kind of drove me to move out of women's studies, because so much of that is really theoretical and focused on the problems.
Right.
So I felt like I had that piece down.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to figure out like how to make change. And I knew that getting a business degree would not only give me the vocabulary for it and the confidence in having conversations, which, is still hard, but
right.
I'd at least have some tools in my tool belt to think about and to talk about with people about how they can make a difference, in their positions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the theory is important, right? Mm-hmm. Learning, there's an upper limit to which defining a problem can be useful, right? Mm-hmm. Functionally. And you have such a cool journey from that discipline to the business and then the change making and what you're doing now. So keep us on that journey. What did you do when you were directing the Changemaker Institute at UNH?
Yeah. So when I started there, we had a few programs. We had the Social Venture Innovation Challenge, which was our, idea competition. And Andy, you know that well.
I'm a has-been.
No.
Maybe a little context. I did participate in the Social Venture Innovation Challenge as a student. I loved it. The low barrier to entry, right, of it just being an idea. It was a great vehicle for students to just get engaged in talking about these things, right? Mm-hmm. Like the idea, the competition itself was for educational
Totally. It was
purposes.
To build up confidence.
Right.
It was to, just spotlight that we have all these amazing students that have incredible ideas, and that's why we're there. We're an educational institution to help build up the skills, right? But to be able to spotlight who are we building up the skills for.
I didn't appreciate until later on how well structured all of that was. So good job.
Yeah, and it just fits so nicely with some of the other competitions and things that we have at the university. You went on to the Holloway competition, and which is a little more business planning and all that technical. But, the idea was that it would help give you that boost of confidence. And
right.
And and it worked. And so we had that program, and then we also had an internship program, which we partnered with the College for Social Innovation on, which was called Semester in the City. Incredible opportunity for students to go and live and learn in Boston while working at a nonprofit or government agency or a mission-driven for-profit for about 30 hours a week. And they'd get 16 credits. So stay on track to graduate, and like build up not just their resume, but their like professional sense of self. And so we had basically those two programs. And from that, we kind of built out with the support of some student employees and just other faculty that helped support us. The Be Impact Clinic, which helps consult companies. So we have student consultants who then work with companies to help them either become B Corp certified or at least assess themselves, across the B Corp certification questions and guidelines. From that, we've also, since started the Carbon or Climate Action Clinic, which gives, again, students the opportunity to consult with organizations or companies and do their carbon accounting.
Right. People talk a lot about the value of college, right? The value of higher education nowadays. And this is just like my personal hot take. Like if I feel like if you're going to go and just, kind of cruise and maybe not be super engaged in all the things that are going on, like it's probably not worth it for you. But if you are ready and willing to really take advantage of all the stuff that's offered, particularly at a place like UNH,
yep.
and I'm biased, but then like, are you kidding? Yeah. There's all these different things you can do. And
totally. And I felt that way about college. I loved my college experience. I didn't want to leave. I was
right.
I was a 5-year graduate, and I was working with college students while I was in college. So I even then started getting
right.
that sense of, wow, this is a really important time in our lives, and wow, we really change a lot during this time and become who we will eventually be. And in many ways, I live vicariously through the students because they got to, not just try things out, but sometimes execute on those things and, create nonprofits or businesses and livelihoods
right.
with that.
Well, I'm sure that it's a lot of people who teach or mentor, they say this, that, say, I'm the teacher, but really I learn constantly.
Always.
Right?
Yeah.
And even as a hall director, right? We similar shared experience. I was an RA for a year, and I definitely. That's not that you really do much. Well, you do plenty actually, good RAs, but I got the most out of that experience from just helping like even one student feel a little more comfortable.
Totally.
Right.
You'd be surprised. I just found my first RA. When I was a student on Instagram, because I just recently joined.
Yeah.
And she has like a full life, right? Married, kids, all that.
Yeah.
And all I remember her for, not all I remember her for, but the first kind of feeling I remember about her is her inviting me over into her room to watch like a movie that I'd never seen.
Yeah.
And for somebody who's like never been to college before, doesn't have any friends, right? It's totally brand new, first year student, to be like enveloped that way and to like, you fit, you're here and it's good, I will remember her till the day I die, and so, I think don't underestimate the power you had of just like connecting people and connecting with people.
Right. You must have this effect on the many, I just came from an interview. I double booked my interviews today, and I had a lovely conversation with Jules Good, who is one of the esteemed alums of the, all these programs in UNH, the Changemaker and all that, and the SVIC. And she said exactly this. She said, man, Faina is an incredible mentor. to me.
So kind.
Well, it's kind of like what you said, someone was nice to you, right? In a way that you remember. And then it kind of, that light turns on for you and you say, I could do that for someone else. Right.
Yeah.
So I love that. I'm sure your journey doesn't feel as, neat
right.
as maybe
in
I'm
it.
talking about it right now, but.
Well, I think the piece about, learning from the experiences I've had with students, and that has really become so tangible as I start this new role, or as I'm in this new role. I've been in for just over a month.
Wow.
So should I talk about that?
Yeah, for sure.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so I'm now the apprenticeship. I'm now the apprenticeship coordinator for leadership and management at Revision Energy. And so it's a mouthful, but what that means is that I help current managers and soon-to-be managers become the best managers they can be at an organization that is absolutely fantastic. So for those of you that don't know, Revision is a employee-owned B Corp. And just in those few words, it tells like a whole story about the founders and that they wanted to really share the mission with the folks that they worked with, and the idea of like co-ownership really feeds into everyone's daily practice there. There's just so much ownership of not just the work that you're doing, but the success of your colleagues and your products, and really wanting to see everyone flourish,
right?
And make the world a better place, right? So I love my job. I've always loved kind of thinking through curriculum, thinking about, how people learn. And I've taught a little bit. I taught in the Women's Studies program a few semesters, and I even taught a semester in the business school. But this is so different because I'm not just creating a curriculum for myself to teach, right? But I am collaborating with subject matter experts on what they think managers should know. So, we'll have somebody from like finance come and talk about business practices, right, and budgets and all that. And so being able to engineer that environment that is most conducive to not just being a good employee, right, or being a good manager, but loving the work and, having a retained workforce that is so positive.
If someone said that to you and they said, hey, look, environment is great, employee engagement is great, social impact is great, but, I'm here to make money, right? Mm-hmm. What would you say to them about all those things?
Yeah, I don't know that I'd say much. I don't think anything I could say, right?
I guess if they framed it that way.
Right, would help. But I would definitely ask a lot of questions like, what's the money going to be used for, right? What's your why? And I think when we start getting to people's why, it's less about money and it's more about joy and family, and so you get them to make a world a better place just by asking them questions. There's not, in my opinion, there's not a lot of people that will say that their goal is to make the world a worse place, right?
Right.
And so I found myself for so many years working with students who came to me asking, how can I do more? So like when I was a hall director, I worked with honors students predominantly, who just wanted to squeeze UNH out of every experience. I worked with, when I worked with women's studies students, they just wanted to create positive change. Same in the Changemaker Collaborative, whether, they were interested in social justice or climate change, right? And so, I think better to show people or put a mirror to them to get to their why, rather than explaining to them like why I'm doing it,
right.
Yeah. And I would say like Revision Energy, they kind of, they started as a mission-driven company, right? So it wasn't, let's make money doing this thing first.
Right.
It was, let's change the world and make it, equitable for everyone. And then, they were like, well, how do we make this profitable, right?
Sure.
So that we can continue. And that's very much, I feel like the aura of it now is, I spend way more of my conversations day to day at work talking about, being responsible and being entrepreneurial and being kind,
Right.
than I do thinking about profit.
Right. Yeah. Well, I love that approach, because it, as you say, there's a kind of fundamental faith maybe in, hey, if we're respectful and we're open and transparent about, what we're trying to do, our motivations, this in the long term can be a real tailwind for our business, right? And like that thesis has very much been proven true, right? By your company and what you do. What lessons at UNH did you learn from students that you now find yourself applying in your work at Revision?
Part of what has been meaningful to me, and what I've learned from students, is that they're not static, right? So they're not static from their freshman year to their senior year, but they're certainly not static from 2000 to 2023.
Right.
And so there has to be a way to be flexible and, use human-centered design and really understand and iterate on what they need, and not what you think they need.
Yeah.
And so in my role now, the curriculum, was created in partnership with an organization called Mzingo, and a great guy named Drew. And he, that's what they did, was interview the managers to say, like, hey, what are you needing, right? What would help you be a better manager or be more comfortable as a manager, be more effective as a manager. And so, now I'm taking that data, right, and incorporating it into the curriculum and iterating on it, right? So we're going to do it kind of like second time around now, and just being okay with it being an iterative process.
Spaghetti on the wall.
Seriously.
I find myself saying that a lot.
Yeah. Spaghetti on the wall, but like the right kind of spaghetti that the wall wants.
Right. Yeah. No.
You know?
It's you clearly some thought's been put into the process and
right. But yeah, this sort of like expectation that your first design or first thing is not going to be successful. Just expect that.
right.
And I tell my kids that all the time because they're learning things for the first time and they're trying things for the first time, and so they get discouraged, right, when things aren't happening the way that they saw on a video, right? And so just reminding them, like, it's not just practice, but it's also learning from your mistakes. And I think that's what I've learned from my students is, because they go through so much of that in those 4 years.
Right. Yeah. And man, there's so many great lessons there. I love everything that you're saying. Like it's exactly as you say, the best lessons, right? Even just like personally, but I think particularly for a business, I think sometimes people have this, I don't know, fallacy or this idea in their head of, if I can just sit for long enough and think about this problem, that I'll think of everything and then I'll solve it, right? And
yeah, I think I'm like a secret entrepreneur. So I always think about, like, if I wanted to start a business, it would probably be just the exact, kind of thing that Revision's doing.
Sure.
So it's great because I get to be there and work there.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I used to always think about not just how to make money, but like it was very important to me. I came from a pretty low middle class family. So I'd find 10 cents under the
Right.
couch cushion
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
10 cents outside. And I'd say to my mom, I have 20 cents, but if you could just give me 5, then I'd have a quarter and it would be awesome. And I'd make my way to like $1 and then I'd run to the store and spend it all
Yeah.
on candy. And that I think was always a joke to my parents that
Right.
but she'd spend it right away.
Yeah.
And at some point I learned to save, and at some point I learned to take that money and do good with it.
Right.
But I think I always had this need to find the puzzle pieces and put them together.
Yeah.
There's a guy who wrote in my yearbook when I was in junior high, poor little Fana sitting on a fence trying to make $1 out of 99 cents. And I don't know, I should Google that and just to see, is that a thing? Like, is that a little poem
I
that
never
people
heard
say?
that, but maybe he did make it up just for
If
you.
he made it up, I mean, I know that word for word because I've revisited,
Right.
so many times that line, and I just think it like totally calls me out because I'm such a like gig, kind
Sure.
of person. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have
yeah.
side hustles all the time,
Right.
and but I try to make them, I want them now like to always be aligned with what I care about.
That is such an inversion of, I don't know, kind of like the hustle ideology. Right? Well, I feel like even the word hustle, right? Or people talk about it, or even side gig and anything like that. I always hear those ideas or ventures or anything framed as like, oh, this is just a way I can squeeze money
Yeah.
out of the world so I can focus on something more selfish, right? But I've never heard of anyone being like, I'm a chronic side hustler for making the world a better place.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Not that those things aren't related. Like you need, like money is an avenue. You
Yeah.
need money, of course, but like, I love that.
No, and I'm a landlord also, right?
Yeah, right.
My partner and I, and so that is. I remember there's a podcast, a really good podcast called Bigger Pockets, that's all about real estate investing, and they have like a forum. And I remember posting really early on, and before we even purchased any property to rent out, saying like, how do people do good with real estate? Like,
Yeah.
what is something, give me some best practices. And I just got bashed, totally bashed. Like, you're in it for the wrong reason. Nobody, this is not why people do real estate investing.
Sure.
All like older men,
Right.
who have been in it for a long time. And so I kind of like canceled my subscription to the forum.
Yeah.
And I figured it out. Like, I figured it out with my partner, and
Yeah.
we purchased a 2-unit in Rochester, New Hampshire, and the rent is way below market rate, and we've kept it that way. And we built a tiny house on our property, and are selling, are renting it out to just amazing people all around,
Right.
in a way that does not deplete them of all their funds, right? It's
Right.
below market rate. They have, all this green like access and our pool, and we get to like enjoy them as part of our extended family,
Yeah.
in some way. And it's so win-win
Right.
that I don't know why you would put so much energy on hustles that weren't.
Yeah. It's just money or something like that. You walk the walk, Fana. I feel like you walk the walk.
I try to as much as I can. I think most of us aren't perfect, and I certainly am not. But I have records playing in my head like everyone else from growing up, and the lessons I learned, and some, hopefully I've scratched enough of those that they pause and I get to rethink my initial observation. But I love being able to fall asleep at night, and I love being able to look at myself in the mirror,
Right.
and feel good. And I love that I have kids now who can kind of see why I do things.
Yeah.
And hopefully, that will move them in that same direction.
Yeah. Of course it will.
So,
Yeah. Well, I feel like you just take in so much from the environment you're in. I mean, even like I was at the Sustainability Institute the other day, right? And they showed me, this is at UNH, they showed me this room that they had built. I hadn't been there in years, and so they showed
the Changemaker Hub.
Yeah, the Changemaker Hub, right? And it's just this wonderful, kind of space they have that's like, I guess you could say it looks like a super modern classroom, like just an open concept, bright, big old whiteboards, desks arranged so everyone's facing each other. There's bean bags, there's a little kitchenette, and just, they said that one of their favorite things is when students walk by who don't know about it, or they're not kind of involved in the sustainability stuff, and they see it and they go, oh, what? That looks kind of interesting. Like, what's going on there? They often don't even know what they need or how to articulate the kind of guidance they're looking for until they're suddenly in an environment where they feel seen and respected in the right way.
And safe to explore. Yeah. And actually, I doubt Jules mentioned this, but she does, help design, really took a huge role in designing the Changemaker Hub.
Did she? Oh man. She also dropped the human-centered design stuff
Oh yeah.
during interviews. So I was like, I wonder if there's a relationship there. But yeah, I mean, she's like you. She's so humble. She would be like, yeah, I helped for 5 minutes when really it was probably the entire thing. She definitely
took the lead. And that's what I mean about, I've been really lucky to work with, to collaborate, with students and with colleagues. Like nothing was done. I can't take the credit for like any specific thing.
Right.
I couldn't do any of the things I do without the support and without the assistance and collaboration of other people who care. And so I try to just surround myself by those kinds of people. And, that I think it helped to move to New Hampshire and to move to a place where there wasn't so much anxiety and frustration like there was how I felt when I lived in Brooklyn, New York. And I think it's conducive to that.
Yeah, that's actually we can lean into the New Hampshire-ness.
Yeah.
So when did you move here?
Yeah, so I moved here probably around 16 years ago. Yeah, I moved right after grad school. And I moved here because my brother lived in Maine and had just had a daughter, and who now is going to college next semester. Like I can't even, it blows my mind.
Yeah, she was 2 yesterday, right?
Right. And so I moved here to watch, his family grow up, not even thinking about me having a family or me growing up. Like I was always, it was just to get closer. And it was great. New Hampshire and Maine are close, but they're very different.
Yeah.
And I really kind of identify with New Hampshire. I really identify with being a being a staff person at UNH, being a support system for students, and now being a support system for managers and other co-owners. And so it took my love of community and really expanded upon it.
Yeah.
Here.
So was there a moment or a particular, when did you start to kind of decide, I think that I can make a real home out of this place, out of this state?
I think it was so soon.
Yeah.
So soon. I moved here. I remember driving and being, on, I think it was Route 16 and seeing all the beautiful lights, heading towards Durham on that bridge. And, and I was just like, God, this is amazing. And then that feeling has never left. Yeah. If I am on that road and it's dark and I see the lights, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. I think I never expected to live in a house with land or a yard or I grew up in an apartment building and sharing my bedroom with my brother who was way too cool for me. And so yeah, I think, I was a hall director and we were young and most of us were single and we were going to Portsmouth all the time and we were cooking together and there was just so much happiness that I think I associated, right, that happiness with New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Whether or not like I would have had that anywhere else, I don't know, but it didn't matter because it felt so like home to me.
Yeah. Yeah. We call it the Shire. We always refer to it as the Shire because it kind of feel like that.
It does, and a lot of my New York friends would call it the Shire.
Yeah.
As like almost an insult.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, you have no idea.
Yeah.
You have no idea until you come visit.
Yeah. Well, I said this to Fiona, right? Kind of the fun kind of, it's not a joke, but part of what I like about doing, this podcast and making it like a New Hampshire oriented thing, right, is that, people, probably from Brooklyn or many places outside, they have this opinion or maybe impression that like this, where it's just a little podunk state that borders, Canada and has 1 million people, and that's like nothing, right? Like what possibly could be going on in New Hampshire? And the answer is, which you and I know, is actually a whole lot, right? Where in so many ways people here are pushing the envelope and innovating and just like doing some of the honestly most incredible stuff, I think.
Totally. And I've had such a front row seat to that. Like I've been so lucky to develop and advise these like fellowships and internships where students get to, have real professional experiences with the leaders in New Hampshire and, the region. And really kind of become the next generation, right, of change makers because they're seeing it. They're like seeing the role models doing the things that they may have only like read about as this theoretical, like magical world.
Right.
And yet they're seeing people like live out their values, and they're cool people, and they're many of them are younger and but not all, and they're seeing what balance looks like, and I've just, because I've been able to be in a place where I can match great students with great organizations, it really has been like a magical view of New Hampshire.
Yeah. Another thing I love about all this is it's a real, like you were just saying, this idea of where the heroes were waiting for. Right? You think of a problem or a thing you want to do and it seems impossible, and then someone shows you, oh, it's not. I could do that, right?
Yeah.
Like I could do that. I could do it differently. And you've lit in that light for so many people.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's less like I can do that and more like I'm going to try that.
Right.
Like, let's just try it. I've failed so many times. I've tried to start businesses that, haven't been successful. And then the things that stick and the things that work, they were meant to be because, they were. And, but I wouldn't have gotten to that unless I took some risks beforehand. And so, yeah, I think there's a level of risk taking that we're almost like told as we're growing up not to take.
Yeah.
Because our decisions matter.
Right.
But when I can remember that I'm just living one life and this is my only chance, then I get to be freer with those risks.
You do a great job of talking about the importance of, risk taking and trying as its own discipline, right? That it's okay if something doesn't succeed. What's important is that someone tries, right? And that failure is more often than not part of the process, and it's something to lean into, not to be ashamed of, to celebrate, and it's counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Usually people, they only want to talk about all the things that have gone perfectly for them, but you're up here being like, I fail at stuff all the time.
I totally do. And it's costly,
Right.
and it costs money to sometimes fail. But I will say that those real failures have been more impactful than like any degree I could get.
Right.
You know, and I love learning and I love getting degrees, so it's not beyond me. But the actual like trying and, you know, failing and trying again, that you can't. It's invaluable.
Yeah. Oscar Wilde, who's one of my favorite people, he has some quote that's like, education's great, but nothing worth learning can be taught, right? So it's like, maybe we can't sit here and explain everything to everybody that they need to know, but we can teach them, hey, this is how to figure it out, right?
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm so I'm such a proponent of like project-based learning and experiential learning. You know, I think there's a place for lectures and textbooks and all that. But I think to like truly understand ourselves, understand our lives, we have to experiment with them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all experimentation all the time, right?
Yep.
And it's actually maybe better that way, I think.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't learn, or nothing would change if it was all the same all the time, right? Well, I feel like I could talk to you all day long, but I've got to ask contractually, tell me what makes you optimistic about the future of your work or anything?
What makes me optimistic?
Yeah.
You know, in my work now at Revision, I have about 500 colleagues who are as deeply passionate about creating a better world that, you know, as I am. And that makes me optimistic. Like, those people have family and friends and children and nieces and nephews and, you know, all that good stuff, who are being inspired by them. I feel like there's so many of us, right? Not just at, you know, Revision, of course, but there's so many people I know in New Hampshire that are moving in that direction.
Right.
That, you know, not feeling alone is a huge part of feeling confident and feeling optimistic.
Yeah.
So I think the gold is in the company we keep.
Yeah. I love that. I totally agree. One of the people for Project Drawdown, which is this, you know, big, ambitious group of people trying to put together all the cleverest solutions for climate, right? Paul Hawken, I think, is the guy, but he says, you know, when I look at the data on an issue like climate change, you can't help but feel pessimistic. But when I look at the people and I talk to the people, you can't help but feel optimistic, right?
Totally.
So there's something to that, right? There's a magic, there's a kind of trick there where it's like, keep your head down. It happens slowly, you know, but we got a lot of great people doing great things. And
well said.
You're one of them.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
It's been great.
I'd really like to have you on again someday, hopefully.
Anytime.
After my 500th episode or something.
Yeah.
We could do a reunion.
Well, this was great. Felt great for me, and I hope that you have, you know, 500,000 episodes.
Oh yeah, here we go.
You make it sound, you make it very comfortable. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fana.
Sure.
Hey there. Thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator of Granite Goodness and the host of the Granite Goodness podcast, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.